Good afternoon. This is the Be My Own Boss podcast, and I'm your host, Mike Hruby. It is very nice to be with you here today. We have big news for independent contractors. It's just great news. It's the next big step forward. So I wanted to tell you what's happening. I want to talk about the events, and I would like to interpret them so that you can see how this connects to a number of other things, because it's great news. It's one step in a journey. The big fact is that a California Congressman, Kevin Kiley, has offered a labor law bill that protects IC status in law. This bill is big news. It will get more play in the future. I'm hoping you've heard about it or will soon, but here it is. Kiley has made himself an important young man in Washington. He was important in California. He's closely connected to President Trump. We've talked about this here on these podcasts. He's been fighting bad California laws like AB 5 for 6 of the last 8 years, and he's been fighting for good bills in the last 2 years. He's now in his second term in Congress. He represents the part of California that's along the slanty portion of Nevada. Kiley has proposed a short, clear bill entirely about defining independent contractor status. It's short because that's all it does. It defines it. And it's clear because you can read it and you can understand what he's doing. It's so new that there's no bill number yet, but I'm going to put up a QR code so that you can get to the bill right now, anytime you want. I'm going to add this into the screen. I'll put this up now and I'll click it off. And I will click it off, and I will come back to it again at the end. But I want you to have access to this because it is really important. If you get behind this bill, we can get it passed, and it is the great next step forward. What does the bill do that makes it important? It adds one legal thing called a paragraph to federal labor law. Paragraphs can do a lot in law. And it says that 2 factors are key to defining independent contractor status. The first one is control in the way the work is done. And the second one is the opportunity of the person who does the work for entrepreneurship. And it says in law that those are the key factors. Now, you may remember the 2 key factors phrase from a year and a half ago. In the beginning of 2020, Trump tried to put a new test into law. And Biden was able to rescind it in 2024 and put a horrible 260-page bill in instead, regulation instead. And this short bill from Kevin Kiley overrides the Biden regulation. In federal law, regulations are subordinate to legislation. So the holy grail here is getting what you want in law, so it overrides what the agencies and the courts say. So in addition to those 2 factors, control of the way the work is done and the opportunity for entrepreneurship, Kiley's bill also excludes 4 circumstantial factors, which are less important and not useful to go into here, but they have to do with excluding from consideration whether the buyer of the services requires the doer of the work to comply with regulations or with standards or with insurance or with deadlines. And those are important, but they're not earth-shattering. It's good. That's why the bill is clear, because these are good things to establish. Good. The bill applies to both a body of law called the Fair Labor Standards Act and to the National Labor Relations Act. And that is the bulk of the important legislation that governs independent contractors and their status. Either way, this Kiley bill overrides what was called the Biden administration's 2024 final rule, and we've talked about that too. That Biden regulation was a big step backward. So what Kiley is offering to all independent contractors is a fast fix using legislation, which is great because, as we see, legislation prevails over regulation, but also because Trump and Kiley, in this effort, have two houses of Congress who are nominally of the same party, and you'd think thinking logically that that would mean that they could pass it, which they could if Congress chose to go along with it. But as you have seen with getting Trump's nominees through the Senate, that there are a lot of opinions in Washington, and they're not all logical, and they're not all cooperative. But this bill is excellent, and if we get behind it, we can pass it. The bill is ingeniously written. It's ingeniously written. It's simple and sweet. Law hides all its secrets kind of out in the open. You have to know that they're secrets and know how to interpret it. But this bill overall is a terrific next step for independent contractors and for patriots who just want the freedom to be their own boss. So I expect quick progress on this bill through Congress with this kind of presidential, legislative, and public support behind it. Okay, now I'm going to hide the bill for a little while and just be here. There is related news, which it will be magnified. Lori Chavez DeRemer, who is a nominee for Secretary of Department of Labor, gets her Senate hearing on Wednesday the 19th, that's tomorrow, at 10 a.m. We're going to be watching, we're going to be taking notes, and then we will report to you. Now, this is a separate issue, it would seem to most people if you think about it, but I believe they're connected. You remember Chavez DeRemer. We've talked about her. She's connected to Teamsters President Sean O'Brien. You remember she stood with President Trump and Sean O'Brien, and the three of them, they took a picture. Lori was playing with her jacket. She's part owner of a medical outsourcing firm covering surgical anesthesia with IC nurse anesthetists, and I think that's fine. It's a great business. I'd love to own it or work with her. Big growth potential, but that makes her a really puzzling nominee for Secretary of Labor, because you can't figure out how she's going to function in a business that has a lot to do with independent contractors. As an individual with experience, she is not cabinet-level material in the Trump 47 administration. We've talked about that. I expect crossover voting. Many Dems are going to vote yes to get her across the line and get her approved. Many R's will vote no because she's she's a co-sponsor of the PRO Act, and that is not something the Republicans want to hear about. This is a perfect setup with her hearing tomorrow, Wednesday the 19th, and Kylie's bill now in the background. So here is my interpretation. And if you have questions, you can welcome to put them in the chat. Hi, traveler. Looks like you can see us and hear us. I'm delighted. Thank you. Good to hear from you. Okay. Now, here is my interpretation. This is not necessary. This is just how I see it. This is how I see what's happening. If the Dems and the Rhino Republicans pass Lori Chavez DeRimmer as DOL secretary, you have to ask the question, and I will, is her job a smokescreen? Interesting. For a while, I thought it was the big fight. If it were a smokescreen, it would make it easier for Congress to pass Kylie's bill intact. It's a very short bill. You remember that we had the. I'll put the QR code up here again, and so if you're just coming in late, you can see that we have access to it. It's 3 pages. It's actually 2 pages of very, undergraduate text. Very spread out. Misclassifying independent contractors is a major mission of the Department of Labor. That's one of the reasons they wanted it set up. That was going to be their ramparts from which they were going to attack independent contractors nationwide and get rid of us. It didn't happen, but that's a lot of the work. Without the independent contractor mission, since this law takes care of a lot of the judgment that is the Department of Labor has gathered to itself, Trump and his DOJ team could easily shrink DOL's, Department of Labor's, staff and budget. It's $17 billion. I mean, it's a lot of money. No, 17,000 people, $11 billion. That's a huge amount of money. What do they do with it? We don't know. We've seen that nobody else knows what's being spent in Washington, too, so this could be interesting. And a court has said, yes, you can go look at DOL. Okay. Then, if separately the Congress passed and Trump signed national right to work legislation, that could shrink the DOL mission further. And with all that, I think Trump's mission, Trump's goal is to downgrade the DOL below cabinet level, and nothing makes it easier than putting in someone whose value you don't really respect. That's where I think Lori Chavez DeRimmer will end up in Washington. So, in that case, they lower it below cabinet level. It doesn't have to report at cabinet meetings, and they can further cut its headcount and budget, which is in line with what they need to do in order to keep the country afloat. So this act, the nomination acts like a smokescreen and kind of a quid pro quo, tit for tat. Like, okay, we passed we accept the Secretary of Labor that the Democrats and the Republicans both wanted. Now we're going to put this legislation through. We expect you to reciprocate and pass this. When that law passes, this will be a huge win for self-reliant independent contractors like you and me. It's really 2 thumbs up. It would be great news. So with that, happy to answer any questions. And what comes to mind here is that this is a major crossroads, and that it's going to affect all of us. The this clarification of work status of 76 million people is a front burner issue. And I think it's wonderful that Kevin Kiley is bringing this forward at this time and in this sequence. I think it's just wonderful. I hope the bill doesn't get adjusted. I hope the Republicans try to pass it as is. You can see for yourself. We'll make it available, but it's, if you want to go back into the recording and see what we've got, see what they've got behind the QR code. It's the bill as Kiley has submitted it. I think it'll be probably given a number later this week. Anyway, thank you very much. This has been episode 34 of Be My Own Boss podcast. We are getting closer to being our own bosses. I think maybe next time we'll start to talk about some of the special features, what's likely to happen as a result of this bill, and also some of the feedback on Lori Chavez de Remer's interview and hearing in Washington. So with that, let me say thank you very much. It's been great being with you. And as usual, post your questions in the chat and in the conversation below the video. And we'll see you next episode. This is Mike Hruby signing out.